One of the strangest realizations in adult life is discovering that nothing is obviously wrong, and yet something about your life feels deeply off. You wake up, you follow the routine, you handle the responsibilities. From the outside, everything looks stable, reasonable, even successful. But late at night, when everything finally becomes quiet, a thought appears, a simple one, and strangely uncomfortable. How did I end up living a life I don't actually want? Not a terrible life, just not yours. You didn't ruin your life. You built it carefully, responsibly, decision by decision. The practical job, the safe choices, the expectations you followed because they seemed reasonable, and each step made sense at the time. Each decision looked correct, responsible, mature. But something strange happened along the way. While you were busy building a life that worked, you slowly stopped asking a very important question. Is this actually the life I want? Because life doesn't drift off course in dramatic moments. It happens quietly. You make one practical choice, then another, and suddenly years have passed. You have a life, a routine, responsibilities, a direction. But deep down, something feels slightly disconnected. Not painful, just distant. Like you are performing a role in a life that somehow became yours. You're capable, you're functioning, you're handling everything that needs to be handled. But sometimes, when the noise of the day fades, a strange realization appears. Your life makes sense, but it doesn't feel like it belongs to you. And that realization raises a question most people try to avoid. If you carefully built the life you're living, when exactly did you stop building the life you actually wanted? The unsettling part about building a life you don't want is that it rarely feels wrong while it's happening. There's no alarm, no dramatic moment where everything suddenly goes off track. Instead, life simply moves forward, one reasonable decision at a time. You take the job that offers stability. You accept the opportunity that seems practical. You follow the path that most people say makes sense, and each step feels logical, responsible, mature. You're doing what adults are supposed to do. You're building security, creating stability, moving forward. But there's something subtle about this process. Each time you make the practical decision, the question of personal meaning quietly moves to the background. Not gone, just postponed. You tell yourself you'll think about it later, when things settle down, when life becomes less busy, when you finally have time to ask the deeper questions. But life rarely pauses long enough for that moment to arrive. Responsibilities multiply, expectations grow, opportunities appear that feel too sensible to ignore, and slowly, your life becomes a structure built from reasonable choices. From the outside, it looks solid, predictable, stable, but inside that structure, a strange thing begins to happen. You stop asking certain questions. Questions like, what kind of life actually feels meaningful to me? What kind of person do I want to become? What would a life that truly feels like mine look like? Instead, your attention becomes focused on maintenance, deadlines, bills, schedules, responsibilities. Your life begins operating on momentum. You're not choosing the direction anymore. You're sustaining it. And momentum has a quiet power. Once a life starts moving in a certain direction, it becomes easier to continue than to question it. So you keep moving. You handle what needs to be handled. You build what needs to be built. Until one day, you pause long enough to notice something unsettling. You successfully built a life, a stable one, a responsible one. But somewhere in the process, you never stopped to ask whether it was actually the life you wanted to live. Once a life begins moving in a certain direction, something powerful takes over. Momentum. Momentum is one of the strongest forces in human life. Not because people consciously choose it, but because it quietly removes the need to question direction. When momentum is strong, you simply continue. You wake up, follow the routine, handle the responsibilities, repeat the pattern tomorrow. And because the system keeps functioning, it feels unnecessary to stop and examine it. After all, everything technically works. Your life runs. Your responsibilities are managed. Your role in the world is clear. So the question of direction fades even further into the background. But momentum has a strange psychological effect. The longer you continue moving in one direction, the harder it feels to consider another. Not because change is impossible, but because the structure of your life becomes heavier. Responsibilities accumulate. Financial commitments appear. Relationships settle into predictable roles. Expectations from others become fixed. And slowly, the life you built begins feeling less like a choice and more like something you must maintain. At that point, many people stop thinking of their life as something they are actively shaping. Instead, they experience it as something they must protect, something fragile, something that cannot be disrupted. And this is where the momentum trap quietly forms. The life itself might not feel deeply fulfilling, but changing it feels dangerous, risky, irresponsible. So the safest option seems obvious. Keep going, keep maintaining, keep sustaining what already exists. The mind becomes very good at justifying this. It tells you things like, everyone feels this way sometimes. Maybe this is just what adulthood is. At least things are stable, and stability becomes the central value. Stability feels safe, predictable, controlled, but stability can also create an invisible prison. Not a painful one, not an obvious one, but a comfortable one. A life where everything works. Yet something essential feels missing. And because the absence is subtle, many people ignore it for years. They become experts at functioning, experts at managing responsibilities, experts at appearing successful. But occasionally, small moments interrupt that pattern. A quiet drive home after work, a silent moment sitting alone, a random thought that appears when the day finally slows down. And suddenly, a question surfaces. A quiet one, a dangerous one. Is this the life I actually want to live? That question is unsettling because it threatens momentum. Momentum depends on not asking it, on continuing forward without examining the direction too closely. But once the question appears, it rarely disappears completely. It lingers, returning in quiet moments, during late nights, during long walks, during the strange pauses where you suddenly notice how quickly time is moving. And with that question comes another realization. You didn't end up here by accident. You arrived here step by step, choice by choice. Each decision made sense in the moment. Each decision seemed reasonable, responsible, necessary. But when those decisions accumulate over years, they form a life. And once that life exists, changing direction feels incredibly difficult. Not because the path is locked, but because the cost of questioning it feels high. What if you disrupt stability? What if others don't understand? What if the change leads somewhere uncertain? These fears keep momentum alive. They keep people moving forward, even when the direction feels increasingly disconnected. And the longer momentum continues, the more unfamiliar the idea of choosing a new direction becomes. Because choosing requires something many people haven't practiced in years: self-honesty. The willingness to ask uncomfortable questions. The willingness to admit that a life can work and still not feel right. That realization can feel frightening, but it also reveals something important. Momentum may shape the path you're currently on, but momentum is not destiny. The life you built may feel heavy, complex, difficult to change, but it is still something that was built, which means direction was never completely outside your control. It simply drifted while your attention was focused somewhere else. And once you begin noticing that, the momentum trap begins to lose some of its power. Because awareness does something momentum cannot. It pauses the system, just long enough for a different question to appear. Not just, is this the life I want? But something deeper, something more honest. If I continue exactly like this, what will my life look like in 10 years? That question has a strange effect. It stretches the present moment forward. It forces you to imagine the direction of your life, not just today, but over time. And sometimes, that projection reveals something surprising. The life you are maintaining today may slowly become the life you are permanently living. Not because it was the life you truly wanted, but because momentum quietly carried you there. And once a person realizes that, another possibility appears. A possibility momentum tries to hide. The possibility that direction can still change. Not instantly, not dramatically, but consciously, one decision at a time. The same way the current life was built. One of the most confusing experiences in adult life is realizing that a life can look completely successful from the outside and still feel strangely empty on the inside. You did what you were supposed to do. You followed the sensible path. You made responsible decisions. You built stability. And in many ways, that stability is real. Your life works. The system functions. People around you might even admire what you've built. From their perspective, everything seems right. But inside the experience of living that life, something feels slightly off. Not dramatic, not catastrophic, just quiet. A subtle sense that the life you're maintaining doesn't fully belong to you. This is what makes the situation so difficult to understand. If something were obviously wrong, the solution would be clear. If the job were unbearable, you would leave. If the environment were toxic, you would escape. But that's not the problem. The problem is much more subtle. Your life is comfortable, but comfort can be deceptive. Comfort reduces friction. Comfort removes urgency. Comfort allows systems to continue operating without being questioned. And when a life becomes comfortable enough, it can slowly transform into something else. A comfortable prison. Not a painful prison. Not an obvious one, but a psychological one. A life where everything functions, yet something essential feels missing. And the strange thing about comfortable prisons is that they rarely feel like prisons at first. They feel like achievements. You worked hard to build this life. You invested years into it. Energy, effort, sacrifice. Walking away from something like that doesn't feel responsible. It feels reckless. So instead of questioning the structure, most people simply continue maintaining it. They improve it, optimize it, refine it, but rarely ask whether the structure itself is actually the right one. And over time, maintenance becomes the central activity of life. You wake up, maintain the routine, maintain the responsibilities, maintain the expectations others have of you. And if everything keeps functioning, the system rewards you. You appear reliable, responsible, successful. But the deeper question still waits quietly underneath it all. A question comfort tries to hide. Does this life feel alive to you? Not productive, not efficient, alive. Because productivity and aliveness are not the same thing. You can be extremely productive while feeling completely disconnected from the experience of living. You can be highly efficient while feeling strangely distant from your own life. And the longer a person stays inside that pattern, the more normal the feeling becomes. Eventually, they stop expecting life to feel different. They begin assuming this quiet emptiness is simply part of adulthood, something everyone experiences, something no one talks about openly. But every once in a while, something breaks through the pattern. It could be a conversation, a book, a moment of silence, a random thought that appears unexpectedly. And suddenly, you see your life from a slightly different angle. Instead of looking at the responsibilities, you look at the direction. Instead of focusing on the structure, you focus on the experience of living inside it. And that shift can be unsettling because it reveals something most people try not to think about. A life can be perfectly constructed and still feel misaligned, not broken, not failing, just not yours. You followed the map, but the destination does not feel like home. And that realization creates a very uncomfortable tension. Part of you wants to ignore it, to return to the routine, to keep momentum moving forward. But another part of you begins asking questions. Quiet ones, persistent ones. Questions like, how long have I been maintaining this life without asking whether it actually fits me? What would happen if I stopped focusing on stability and started focusing on meaning? Is the life I'm protecting the life I actually want? These questions are difficult because they challenge comfort. And comfort always resists change. It tells you that disruption is dangerous. That questioning the system is irresponsible. That stability must be protected at all costs. But sometimes, the most dangerous life a person can live is not a chaotic one. It is a perfectly stable one that slowly disconnects them from themselves. A life where everything works, yet nothing feels alive. And the moment a person truly sees that possibility, something begins to shift. Because awareness changes the experience of comfort. What once felt safe can suddenly feel restrictive. What once felt stable can suddenly feel limiting. And that realization opens the door to a very different kind of question. Not just, how do I maintain the life I built, but something much deeper. Is this the life I want to keep building? For most people, the realization does not arrive all at once. There is no dramatic breakdown, no sudden crisis. Instead, it appears quietly, in moments where life slows down just enough for awareness to catch up. It might happen during a late drive home. The road is empty. The city lights pass slowly through the windshield. Your hands are on the wheel, but your mind drifts somewhere deeper. Or maybe it happens at night. You're lying in bed. The room is dark. Your phone is silent. The day is finally over. And for the first time in hours, nothing is demanding your attention. No tasks, no messages, no expectations, just silence. And in that silence, a question appears, a very simple one, but strangely difficult to answer. If nothing changes, is this the life I will keep living? That question has a powerful effect because it stretches the present moment forward. Suddenly, you are not just thinking about today. You are imagining years, 10 years, 20 years, the same routine, the same structure, the same direction. And for the first time, you are not evaluating whether your life works. You are asking whether it feels right. Not efficient, not stable, right. And that difference matters, because a life can function perfectly while still feeling misaligned. You can handle every responsibility, maintain every expectation, meet every external standard of success, and still feel something quietly missing. That moment of honesty is uncomfortable because it removes the usual distractions. You cannot blame circumstances. You cannot blame other people. You cannot pretend you were forced into this life. You built it, step by step, decision by decision. And that realization creates a strange mix of emotions. Part of you feels proud. You managed life. You handled responsibility. You built something stable. But another part of you feels something else, a quiet disappointment. Not because you failed, but because somewhere in the process, the question of what you truly wanted stopped guiding your decisions. And once you see that clearly, another realization begins forming. The life you built did not appear overnight. It formed slowly, through years of small choices. Choices that made sense at the time. Choices that prioritized safety, practicality, expectations. But if your life was built through small choices, then something important becomes possible. It can also change through small choices. Not instantly, not dramatically, but gradually, the same way it was built. One decision at a time. The honest moment does not demand that you destroy your life. It simply invites you to look at it clearly, to ask whether the direction you are moving in still belongs to you. And once that question is asked honestly, something inside you begins waking up. Not panic, not rebellion, just awareness. The awareness that a life can continue exactly as it is, or it can slowly begin shifting towards something that feels more aligned with who you are becoming. And that awareness changes everything, because the moment you begin seeing your life clearly, you are no longer drifting through it. You are participating in it. Once a person reaches that honest moment, the mind usually jumps to a dramatic conclusion. If this isn't the life I want, I must need to change everything. But that assumption is rarely true, and believing it often creates another trap. Because when change feels too large, people avoid it completely. They convince themselves it's unrealistic, too disruptive, too risky. So instead of adjusting direction, they return to maintaining the same life. But meaningful change rarely begins with dramatic decisions. It begins somewhere much smaller, with awareness. Awareness changes the way you experience your life. Before awareness, you simply move through routines. You respond to responsibilities. You follow the direction momentum created. But once awareness appears, the same life begins to look different. You begin noticing things you never questioned before. The routines, the patterns, the expectations you automatically fulfill. You begin noticing where your attention goes every day. What consumes your energy? What drains it? What quietly brings curiosity back? And this is where something important begins. Because the direction of your life is shaped by something most people overlook. Attention. Where your attention repeatedly goes, your life slowly follows. If your attention lives entirely in obligation, life begins to feel mechanical, predictable, heavy. But when attention occasionally returns to curiosity, something begins to open again, not dramatically, just enough to remind you that life is not only something you maintain, it is something you experience. Many philosophers understood this idea deeply. They believed the quality of a person's life is shaped by the way they direct their attention. The Roman Stoic Marcus Aurelius wrote that a person's inner world is formed by the thoughts they return to most often. In other words, your identity slowly grows in the direction of your awareness. If your attention stays trapped in survival, your identity becomes survival. If your attention returns to meaning, your identity begins growing toward meaning. This is why reclaiming direction does not require destroying the life you built. It requires something simpler. You begin asking different questions. You begin noticing different possibilities. You begin giving attention to the parts of life that feel alive again. Curiosity returns slowly, maybe through a subject you want to explore. Maybe through conversations that feel deeper. Maybe through ideas that make you pause and think differently about your future. These moments seem small, but they matter more than most people realize. Because identity does not change overnight. It changes through patterns. Patterns of thought, patterns of attention, patterns of decision. The same way your current life was built, through small steps repeated over time. The turning point in life is not a dramatic reinvention. It is the moment a person realizes they are allowed to question the direction of their life, allowed to reconsider, allowed to explore, allowed to shift their attention towards something that feels more meaningful. Once that permission appears, Life begins to feel different, not easier, not instantly transformed, but more conscious, more intentional. You are no longer simply maintaining a life. You are slowly reshaping it, not by destroying the structure you built, but by deciding what parts of it truly belong to you. And once a person begins making decisions from that place of awareness, their life gradually begins changing direction, one choice at a time, the same way it was originally built. At some point, every person faces a quiet realization about their life, not about success, not about failure, but about ownership. The question is simple, but uncomfortable. Is this life actually mine? From the outside, your life may look complete. You followed the expected path. You handled responsibility. You built something stable. But stability alone does not answer that question. Because a life can look perfect on paper and still feel strangely distant inside. A life can work without ever truly feeling like it belongs to you. And when someone begins noticing that difference, they start seeing their life in a new way, not just as something they maintain, but as something they are continuously shaping. That realization is powerful because it breaks the illusion that life is fixed, that your direction is already decided, that the structure you built cannot evolve. But the truth is something much simpler. Your life has never been static. It has always been moving, always adapting, always changing. The person you were 5 years ago is already different from the person you are today. Your values have shifted. Your awareness has grown. Your perspective has evolved, which means something important. The life you built in the past does not have to define the life you continue building. Not completely. Because life is not something you construct once. It is something you shape continuously, through attention, through awareness, through the questions you allow yourself to ask. And sometimes, the most important moment in a person's life is not the moment they achieve something impressive. It is the moment they pause long enough to look honestly at the direction they are moving. To ask, is this life still aligned with who I am becoming? That question does not require immediate answers. It simply opens awareness. Awareness creates space. Space creates possibility. Because once you truly see the direction of your life, you are no longer drifting through it unconsciously. You are participating in it. You are shaping it, not perfectly, not all at once, but gradually. One decision at a time, one shift in attention at a time, the same way your current life was built. This is what many people eventually realize. You don't wake up one day and suddenly find the perfect life. You slowly move closer to one by paying attention to what feels meaningful, by noticing where your curiosity lives, by questioning directions that no longer feel aligned, and by remembering something most people forget. The purpose of your life is not simply to function well. It is to feel connected to the experience of living it. And sometimes, the most important turning point in a person's life is the moment they finally ask a question they avoided for years. Not whether their life works, but something deeper, something more honest. If I keep living exactly like this, will this life eventually feel like it truly belongs to me? Because once that question becomes real, the direction of your life is no longer something that happens automatically. It becomes something you begin choosing again.